3 houses, 4 routes leave the continent of Fodlan in vastly different situations depending on which route the player picks. Last time we looked into the Golden Deer route's ending, but now we'll be delving into the Crimson Flower route. I said this in my last video in the Fate of Fodlan series, but I'll say it again just to be clear. My goal is to take a fair and honest look at each of the endings, regardless of how I feel about them, to create the most clear image of the pros and cons of each ending. Any difference in opinion when it comes to the validity of each ending comes down to personal philosophy due to the game's excellent writing. Alright, now let's get into analyzing the Crimson Flower ending to see if it really is the new dawn that Edelgard intends it to be. To look into how Fodlan ends up in the end of the Crimson Flower route, it's integral to see the state of the Udrestian Empire at the start of the game to better understand the factors that inform Edelgard's goals within her ending. At the start of the game, we learn that the Udrestian Empire is the oldest government in all of Fodlan, and has had its power waning for quite a while, with the loss of its territory and the degeneration of its imperial power. The Udrestian Empire lost a significant amount of land when the Holy Kingdom of Fargus and the Leicester Alliance would rebel against the Empire to form their own independent nations, making the Empire less politically relevant than it was at the height of its power. Consequentially, the Udrestian Empire would also have a more strained relationship with the Church of Seiros after the Church would legitimize the rebelling kingdom. The nobility of the Udrestian Empire also played a significant role in the degeneration of the Empire because they started a conspiracy to seize power from the Udrestian Emperor to further their own self-interests. The result of this insurrection of the Seven is that the Emperor effectively became a puppet to the various nobles, creating a fractured and corrupt state. In committing their conspiracy, they would ally with the Agarthans, who would experiment on the Emperor's children, and would ultimately groom Edelgard to become the person that we see when we first meet her in 3 houses. So when Edelgard is inaugurated at the end of White Clouds, she inherits a crumbling empire that's steeped in the flawed traditions of the crest system, and it's her goal to rectify the failures of her predecessors. Now that the context of the politics within the Empire and Edelgard's goals have been established, we can look into what exactly changes when Edelgard finally defeats the Church in her ending. The end of the Crimson Flower route is quite different from other routes in the thorough defeat of the Church and the Nabateans, as well as the new government it's created. The ending sees the Udrestian Empire rout the Church of Seiros in the war and ending the conflict by killing the Pope of said church. Edelgard has expressed previously that her quarrel is with the Church authority themselves and not with its followers, but it seems unlikely that the Church of Seiros would retain the same theological and political coherency after being defeated and having its core tenets entirely done away with. The Udrestian Empire's actions in the Crimson Flower route nullify the influence of the Nabateans on the humans of Fodlan, permanently severing the connection between the two. For once in its long history, Fodlan no longer has immortal beings participating in their affairs, which will likely lead to an entirely new path for Fodlan that was previously unseen because of such superhuman intervention. Along with eliminating the crest system, Edelgard also unifies Fodlan and reorients her fight towards the Agarthans immediately after her victory, but it remains unclear if this is resolved or not.
With the fall of Ferdiad, the Holy Kingdom of Fargus and the Church of Seiros both vanished into the people's memories. Fodlan was finally one unified nation, under the rule of Emperor Edelgard and the Udrestian Empire. Embracing her newfound power, Edelgard could at last set about destroying Fodlan's entrenched system of nobility and rebuild a world free from the tyranny of crests and status. Yet, beneath the surface, an unseen and silent struggle began to take shape. From her seat of power, Edelgard could at last wage war on those who slither in the dark.
Now that what exactly happened in the Crimson Flower ending has been established, we can begin to look into what about the ending is beneficial to Fodlan and what is detrimental. Starting off with the benefits, Edelgard succeeds in her dream of entirely dismantling the crest system of oppression in Fodlan and works to create a world where people can rise and fall based on their own merits. This can be highly beneficial to Fodlan overall, allowing for greater social mobility and creates a more egalitarian society that can benefit many of the students within 3 houses as well. The entirety of the reunified Udrestian Empire will be entirely restructured to move away from the hierarchical system of crests and subsequently the system of nobility, giving every individual within Fodlan agency over their place in this new world. No longer will people be conscripted into certain roles based on the manifestation of a crest, or even possession of noble blood, and instead they'll be able to earn their place in the new Udrestian Empire through them proving themselves. You can see the specific intention expressed in her support with Caspar.
Would you be happier if you were the heir to House Burgleys?
Of course. My brother probably wouldn't be too happy about it, though. I've got nothing against him, and I'd hate to cause him trouble, so I guess it wouldn't make me very happy at all.
You may not want to hear this, but your brother is not a good man. He's lazy and greedy, and has always relied on the knowledge that he would inherit a title. That's my impression of him, anyway.
And while what the new Udrestian Empire will specifically value isn't explicitly stated, it is still an improvement in terms of social mobility and equality nonetheless. As far as the students of Garreg Mach go, many of them have faced unfortunate circumstances due to the crest system. Whether they're a noble conscripted into an unwanted role like Sylvain or Ingrid, or someone who misses out on opportunities because of their birth, like Dorothea or Caspar. Edelgard will get rid of both issues by eliminating those fatalistic roles and birthrights, providing a relatively equal playing ground where people can achieve the goals that they set for themselves freely, so long as they have the strength to earn it. Now to transition to more pragmatic benefits of Edelgard's ending, Edelgard and Hubert are highly competent in running government, and can likely create a stable system which can keep a power vacuum from forming, and could potentially have a great deal of longevity to it. Edelgard has shown herself to be a highly competent leader, as seen in her ability to coordinate a conspiracy within the Empire to quickly seize and consolidate her power. She was even able to stage her insurrection against the Church right underneath their noses, launching a coordinated strike that would destabilize the Church's solid grip on power. Then, beyond Edelgard herself, her loyal servant Hubert acts behind the scenes to limit all risk factors to Edelgard's reign, and as he likes to say, he does unsavory things that needs to be done. With both leading the new Udrestian Empire, it's reasonable to assume that the United Udrestian Empire will be stable and won't collapse anytime soon, but there's a potential issue with their leadership style, that being their controlling and authoritarian nature. The authoritarian traits of Edelgard and Hubert will likely be perpetuated in the formation of their new government, as it's shown that the two leave little room for others to act because they seem to think that people can't properly make decisions for themselves. Edelgard is the least transparent of all three houses' leaders throughout her route, keeping her allies in the dark for most of the war campaign to obfuscate the truth to serve her ends. The chief example being that Edelgard lies to the Black Eagles after the destruction of Arianrhod and placing the blame on the Church, when in reality it was the Agarthans that were behind the tragedy.
I'm sure everyone has heard about what transpired at Arianrhod. The Church has displayed their cowardice by indiscriminately using forbidden practices to kill the residents there. Their victims also include members of House Rowe, the Imperial Army, and many, many more.
In a Machiavellian sense, this was a highly advantageous decision, displacing blame onto a clear enemy to create a united front against a dehumanized foe. And Hubert himself is notorious for silencing dissidents to Edelgard's rule, and in performing unethical acts that Edelgard herself wouldn't approve of for the same purpose. Hubert is consistently seen being ruthless within the shadows in his dealings with all dissident figures within the Empire at the end of White Clouds, and his assassinations of key figures that are a threat to Edelgard, as seen in his supports with Shamir. Edelgard's primary goal is to destroy the crest system and to redistribute power in Fodlan, but she doesn't have a specific end to achieve. Edelgard does give some vague indications of the kind of things that she would value and would likely implement in her new world, but she leaves a lot to be desired in terms of defining what kind of world she'd like to replace the present one with. At the end of their respective routes, Dimitri and Claude have clear conceptions of the worlds that they wish to encourage, with Dimitri wanting to create a world that enfranchises everyone in Fodlan, and Claude wanting to make a more open world. Because they have clear goals and structures, it's easy to see continued success due to a solid and clear foundation being built. The most that Edelgard says in regards to her primary values and goals is that she values meritocracy and equality. But what she thinks is worthy of merit is again unclear. In general, Edelgard's goal for Fodlan seems to be largely in opposition to the Church and doesn't justify itself, in that Edelgard's political goals are predicated entirely on such opposition. In her ace support with Ferdinand, Ferdinand shares that he values the system of nobility because it raises nobles in an environment that nurtures excellency. Edelgard herself admits that she never really considered the adverse effects of eliminating nobility in that way, which is a pretty large thing to overlook when creating a new system. By contrast, the Church, Claude, and Dimitri all have positive values in the formation of their Fodlans in each ending route respectively. It can be difficult to continue a movement or system that's intrinsically reactionary to the movement or system before it. In a Hegelian sense, Rhea is the thesis and Edelgard is the antithesis, and an antithetical idea is meaningless without the original idea that it's resisting. So this seems to cause a problem of Edelgard not having a clear and concise world after the end of her route. Regardless of its negatives, the Crimson Flower route, like the others, has an equal amount of advantages and disadvantages that really depend on each player's values to judge. Now let's see which faction specifically benefited from that ending and who didn't. The winning factions of the Crimson Flower route are the Udrestian Empire and the lower class of Fodlan. The Udrestian Empire sees a lot of benefits in its removal of all corruption and restoration of the Empire back to its former might and glory. The lower class of Fodlan is poised to receive the most potential benefits of Edelgard's new world, because they will no longer be forced to conform to the crest hierarchy system that didn't allow them to access social mobility. The losing factions of the Crimson Flower route are definitely the Church, Nobility, Fargus, and the Leicester Alliance. The Church lost all of its practical power and authority in the Crimson Flower route, and had its interests completely crushed by the Empire, with the elimination of most Nabateans from the influence in human affairs. The nobility stands to lose most of its traditional authority and seems to have their influence dissipated within Edelgard's Fodlan. Finally, Fargus and the Leicester Alliance have their distinct identities dissolved and are both absorbed into the Udrestian Empire, likely ending most of their previously held traditions and keeping the two regions from maintaining the distinct identities that they have. So the Crimson Flower route's ending has a lot of radical implications for the development of Fodlan in the future. But as with the Golden Deer route, it's unclear as to how Edelgard's world will turn out. And while there can be fair arguments for and against the Crimson Flower ending, it's clear that Edelgard really does intend to make the world a better place, even if her methods can cast some doubt on her ability to achieve that goal. As I said in my Golden Deer ending analysis, there is no clear answer as to which ending is the best, but I do hope that this video at least gave you a different understanding of the Crimson Flower ending. Feel free to discuss what you think of the ending in the comments below, and be sure to check out the Golden Deer ending analysis I did if you haven't already. Because this video is relating to the Crimson Flower ending, I'm sure that there will be some interesting disagreements and discussions in the comments section, so I'm looking forward to the ideas that everyone brings to the table. Once again, thanks for watching, and see you next time. If you liked the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Huh. Looks like the shilling paid off.